All right, Toothers. The first thing I got to figure out is, can I record in airplane mode and then update or upload the audio after? Do I need to just record like a voice memo? I got to figure something out. I'm worried I'm chewing up my data plan all of a sudden. Anyway, it's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk because I'm behind a bus. I'm off to fetch my child from school, and you know, I've watched kind of several videos about essentially how there's a real attack on the public education system, and there probably has been for some time. I don't know how far back it goes, but by and large, we're still dealing with in America this still a classist system, and I think that's part of why so many people in power like capitalism, because it puts some people over other people. Not even just hierarchically, but it feels like there's a certain amount of entitlement for especially some of the wealthiest people talking about doing away with democracy because the people at the top of the economic food chain should be in charge, making the rules. This Peter Thiel lunatic and Elon Musk, who I don't know if anybody saw the picture that he took of him kind of bowing to Trump as though he was, the emperor. But Elon Musk looks like the emperor from Star Wars. It's a really creepy picture, and anybody can get a creepy picture, right? I don't want to pretend that it's the look he always gives to Trump when he's looking at a picture of him, but it just that whole rally seemed really odd having Musk at. But anyway, wow. You have a lot of people that are fighting for charter schools. Now, I'm not here to knock charter schools. I'm not even here to knock the public education system. I definitely have my concerns about what goes on in the public schools, and that's largely because they are underfunded. We don't care about them as a society because we're complaining about taxes, and then the people in charge are trying to undercut what those schools can do, and they're trying to overpopulate them, and there's a lot going on with the public education system that is a real problem and a real concern that we need to kind of deal with. But it's also a lot because, again, the people in charge don't want it, or they want it to be as bad as possible because they want to have the people who have money and power to be at a charter school, to be at a private school, to be at a school that doesn't involve being around the poors and the blacks and the Hispanics and all the people that they don't like for no reason. There's this entitlement and superiority complex that has been running around forever, probably. And, they find new ways to make it, maybe not palpable, but they make it so that it's their agenda, it's their manipulation of, texts, of bills, of thought. I forget who it was. I think it was a Nixon strategist talking about, when he was younger, he used to be able to say the N-word all the time, and then when you stopped being allowed to say the N-word, so you would say other things like segregation or forced busing, or you started to use other terms that meant racist ideas, right? That's why we have these terms like dog whistling. You say the right couple of words, you say the right phrases, and the people, if you know. And for the rest of the people, they're like, well, all they said was this. Yeah, that actually means something to a lot of people who are in that arena, in that space. And, it's a lot of work to keep up with all of this stuff. It can be disorienting and obnoxious, but I'm definitely not able to keep up with all of it. I'm able to keep up with some of it, a portion of it. I don't know how big the situation boils down to, but by and large, it seems to be a constant issue that we need to have. We need to figure out. But either everybody is entitled to an education or they're not, and everyone's entitled to a consistent education or they're not. The fits that went out about Common Core math. Now, look, I find some of the ideas around Common Core math to be not great. I'm not a big fan of it in general, but there is a good idea of having some level of consistency around, what's expected. But do we have that expectation at a federal level, or do we keep it at a state level? These are other questions. And again, we're the United States of America, but we find ourselves super divided. We find a lot of things people are fighting about. Oh, it should be in the hands of the states, like abortion. They're talking about states' rights, as though nobody. I don't know how many people seem to be confused about this fact, but the whole point of the Civil War and the people that are claiming it is about states' rights, because the states' rights were pro-slavery, right? That they wanted to keep slavery in the states. That was the whole thing we were fighting about. And something else, since I'm on the topic, something else that I forget about, but it comes up every now and then. Lincoln himself was pretty racist. He didn't think slavery was good, but he wasn't trying to equivocate rights between blacks and whites. He was not pro-black. He was just anti-slavery. We talk about Washington being the father of the country. Dude had slaves. He gave up his slaves. No, he didn't. I think one slave was freed when he died, and the rest had to wait till after his wife died. I don't think that's free necessarily. He just, hey, you're all fired now, right? You're all cast to the wind. The people on the left like to talk about, slavery going away as some solution to all the problems. All it did was created more problems while, providing a limited amount of safety. It cured a symptom, right? It solved a symptomatic problem that was slavery, but overall, racism and hatred has never gone away. Not by any stretch. And, you look at, you can even look at footage of people on television talking about letting black people move into the neighborhood and how they talked about it. And the words they would use, the phrases that they would say, and the things that they would conjure up just to create the fear and keep the fear going so that people would be reactionary and nobody's being the adult in the room. I was watching another one of the YouTubers that I like today. Her name's Legion Miller. She was a lawyer, but she got tired of kind of the life that she had to live in order to make that work. But she did go through law school. She did become a lawyer. She was hired as a lawyer. Now she does YouTube stuff. I don't know if she does anything else on the side. But, one of the things that she pointed out, because she was watching alt-right TikTokers, which are just the friendless lunatics on the right today that are advertising at that level, right? There are a couple of the guys are in militias. One's clearly a sovereign citizen, which is a whole nother ball of wax. But her larger point was, she's like, I just see a bunch of people who didn't learn how to deal with stressors, who didn't learn how to deal with their own emotional outbursts, and they're just freaking out. They're not bothering to take the time to do any research or to learn anything, right? No one's taking the mature step of saying, hold on, let's find out what's going on, as opposed to, whatever somebody's telling them, just telling them. And I realize that I'm saying I watch YouTubers, but you can find this information. They send you to the sources, right? Meanwhile, a lot of the right, they source talking heads that we know are liars. They source Fox News, who admits that they're not a news organization. They're purely an entertainment organization. They lost almost $1 billion because of the lies they were pressing, the lies they were pushing. They got rid of their most popular person because of the trouble that he was causing them. And people are still telling you that Fox News is the only reliable source, or they've gone too left because they admit that Trump may not be as awesome as the sycophants want to believe. So you get stuck with, OAN or Newsmax or whatever these other organizations are that are falling apart. I mean, Truth Social has lost billions of dollars since Trump took it. I mean, I don't know what people are thinking where Trump's a great businessman. Everything he touches turns to dust, turns to garbage. He's not good. He's not good at what he does. I'm sorry, let me rephrase. He's good at what he does, which is lie to get money, but then it all falls apart. He doesn't actually know how to do the things he claims to do. It's fascinating to me. So he's good at being a con man, and that's really all he can do. That's his only skill is to lie. People buy it. And a lot of what is going on. Frankly, I blame the education system. I blame the incessant need of this country, of people in this country, to just claim religion and to just claim parents' rights and to not bother understanding what's going on. They don't listen to their own illogical perspectives. They won't take the time that is required, honestly, to learn the things that they would be able to then understand. Like, oh, okay. Because there's so much more. I think Carl Sagan talks about this. So there's so much more to wonder about the reality that we have in front of us than the myths and the fairy tales that so many of us believe or have believed in or want to believe in. You know, there are times. I mean, they're kids, and I was a kid once. They're not always excited about school, and I don't. I'm not fond of that attitude. I tell my wish I was in school. Some of the classes my son's taking, I want to take them. Others, I definitely don't. But some I'm curious about. You know, there's a lack of education. There's a lack of kind of mental health focus. I mean, the amount of money that we spend on war versus peace is astronomical. The amount of money we spend on destroying other countries and trying to save our own is ridiculous. You know, the thing that's also kind of funny that Deidre points out, she's the lawyer, she points out that both sides, especially right now, agree that our government is corrupt, that there's so many people in the government who, thanks to the lobbying becoming legal, thanks to Reaganomics, thanks to all these other terrible decisions, largely by Republicans, but also piled on by Democrats, it's destroying the idea that we have a functioning government, we have a functioning democracy, a functioning republic, whatever term you want to use. We're constantly being lied to, and then decisions are being made that do not fall in line with the bulk of the country. There's a larger portion of people who are pro-choice, certainly from a legal perspective, than pro-birth. And yeah, I'm going to do my best to never say pro-life again, because they're not pro-life, they're pro-birth. They're not pro-child after the fact, and they're definitely pro-wipe out the enemy, right? So pro-life is not correct. It's too broad a statement. So I don't know. I guess I'm going to find something to rant on if I just give myself a little bit of time. But you know, my son is in a charter school and my daughter's in public school, and you know, obviously I have friends who have kids in public school as well, and you know, or they're in a charter school or special school because they have kind of specific learning disabilities, and the public school systems that they've been in can't help them, right? They don't have the resources. And you know, for some of the education system, you know, they are kind of meeting the needs of the least common denominator, which is not about IQ or about, you know, who's smarter or not smarter, or who can learn better or who can't learn better. People learn differently. People adapt differently. They can learn slower. There's sometimes I don't get something for a while. Like, it's got to be explained to me, or it's got to be shown to me in a way I don't even know, right? I don't visualize terribly well. It's hit or miss. I generally think about things in terms of words and not pictures. I do try to think about things in pictures, but a lot of them end up like slides in a PowerPoint presentation. So, you know, or like a workflow chart or something, or a mind map where it's still really just 2D. Adding any kind of depth or whatnot is not the first thing that my brain does. So there's some things I don't grasp right away. And I mean, that's fine. It's not a problem. It's not a detriment. It's a different way to learn. And sometimes it can be a problem depending on what we're talking about. I don't want to pretend like every situation is not a problem. It really depends on the circumstances, the situation, and what we're dealing with. But by and large, it's not a big deal. Sometimes it can slow things down. Sometimes you have to ask for more help. Sometimes you have to get help after the fact. Sometimes you have to get tutoring. Some things you do really, really well in, and then you run into something that you can't do well anymore because it's gotten more complicated, and so you have to get help, or you didn't used to have to get help, and then there's those feelings of, oh, geez, I'm a failure, like I failed. No, you're just up against something that you weren't expecting, and you're not really sure how to deal with it. I have a friend of mine. She's a big fan. It's almost like she likes obstacles because she would rather try to solve the issue. I would like to not have the kind of issues that I have, and maybe occasionally set fire to the issues. So, we also handle things differently, and that's for again another number of reasons. But it goes back to the idea of people being individual and having individual concerns and complications, and being in systems that are geared more towards trying to make everybody the same, everybody following the same path, the same program. My daughter had a situation where there's some issues that she doesn't understand how to do certain things in a certain way, but she knows how to do it a different way. And the requirement, she still has to be able to do it both ways. It's like, well, she can do it this other way and get to the same results. Well, she has to be able to do it the other way. But she can't do that, right? Like it doesn't work. So, and I understand wanting to help teach people how to do things, but again, if there are a couple methods to do it, and you can do it one way, but you can't do it the other way, you're still doing it. I mean, out of the real world, right? You're still solving the problem, right? I've been, IT for 30 years, some element of IT, right? So I'm always having to look at certification tests. And one of the annoying things that went on for a long time with Microsoft tests was, oh, well, you have to do it the Microsoft way. Like, no, I don't. I can do it this way. I actually have another great example of that. One of my first jobs, with a guy that went and got, his full MCSE. You don't have to know what that means. But he got his full MCSE, and he'd come in, and he had been building computers. And now he was going to work on the networking side and the business side of the company. And he was looking at the service setup that we had. And he said to our primary server guy, he was like, hey, Paul, you can't, this doesn't work. And he looks at Dan, or Angry Dan, we called him. He's like, what are you talking about? He said, well, Microsoft says you can't do this. Paul says, but it's doing it. Yeah, but you can't. I'm not allowed to? No, it won't work, but it is working, right? Dan couldn't understand that it does work, right? He couldn't understand that the way that he understood what Microsoft was saying, maybe it was wrong, or maybe he was misunderstanding what the server was doing, because he had it in his head that it was doing this thing, and it's supposed to not be able to do that. Like, what is your, like, it's working. Like, what is your deal? All it tells me is that if there's a problem with that server, you're not the one to fix it. I'm calling Paul. And the insistence on being right without allowing the possibility of another way of seeing something, right? I know a number of people who refuse to call trans people by their preferred pronouns or the new names, which to me is childish. I get the idea of wanting to take a stand for something, but you get married, maybe your names change, right? It's not a huge deal. You want to be called something else. If you have a name like Mike, maybe you want to be Michael, maybe you want to be Mickey, maybe you don't want to be called Mickey all the time because the Tony Basil song was rough on you when you were a kid, but you eventually got over that, right? I'm not talking about anybody specific right now. We and sometimes people have nicknames. I work with a guy who called himself Buck. His name was Matt, but he wanted to be called Buck, so he was called. And he was like our sales VP. He would go out and talk to customers. He'd go to hospitals and he would meet with doctors and surgeons and respiratory therapists and hospital administration. They would call him Buck. This is not new. This is not some kind of weird precedent that's trying to be set by a marginalized community who is, 0.01% of the population, 0.1% of the population. I don't remember the exact number, but it's not. It ain't high. It ain't high, right? You're trying to apply, and I already talked about that in the other recording, but you're trying to apply rules that are, I I don't want to say arbitrary, but I mean, think about it's forced. It's this forced mindset that, you know, there's not the level of justification that people think there is. It's what we were told to believe, it's what we were told to think, and we're still like, oh yeah, no, that's right, that's 100% correct. It's not though. It's not correct. So, and the fighting of evolution and wanting to have the Ten Commandments in schools. First of all, Ten Commandments, they're not great, right? I mean, read them. Several of them are about how narcissistic and egotistical God is, or Yahweh, right? And Yahweh, by the way, is not the sole creation of the Hebrew people, the Jewish community. It's actually a Canaanite God, which incidentally the Jewish people were Canaanites. So, you know, there's a lot of history that people are unaware of. They just, again, accept the limitations of what they think that they know rather than learning anything else about anything. And seeing that the further back you go, it's all made up, right? The more you learn and you understand, the more you understand what is actual fact and what is just made up and what people want to believe for whatever reason. It gives them comfort because other people also believe it. They feel like they're part of a group. So, yeah. School, man. We have seatbelt laws unless you're in a school bus. I'm sure there's a reason for that. I don't know. I'm sure there's a reason I don't want to know, but maybe there's a legitimate reason, you know. I worked with a guy who was military intelligence, and he was in the first Gulf War, and they had a rule, you know, IED goes off. IED goes off when you get ambushed. The guys that are going to die first are the ones with seatbelts on. It's a pretty extreme kind of way to live your life, kind of way to drive around town without a seatbelt on, because in the desert you can get shot. And before you start telling me that in certain towns you can get shot too, yeah, you definitely can. Violence is a factor, but when you're in a war zone, your odds go way up. That's all I'm saying. It's not totally comparable to how we stereotype violence in this country. You know, and there's all these people who are trying to protect the children. They're talking about trying to protect the children. The anti-trans people talking about trying to protect them, and the anti-LGBTQ in general. Like, oh well, if it's a gay guy, they're clearly a pedophile. Like, we're trying to protect the children. Like, no, you're not. You don't care. You don't care about the children. That's your excuse. You care about people that live a way that you don't agree with for no reason. I mean, the way that you interpret your holy book is fairly silly in terms of how you treat homosexuals. I don't even think that there's a real solid understanding of what it is that's said in the Bible. I have to spend some time in it, but ultimately it becomes irrelevant to some extent because culturally speaking, people have decided that homosexuals are evil anyway, which is ridiculous. Certain people are evil, or certain people are horrible people. It doesn't matter what other label that they have, what other group that they're a part of. If the individual is horrible, then the individual is horrible. Now, don't get me wrong, the people that have tried to shoot Trump entertainingly have been more on the right than on the left. So this idea that the left is ramping up violent rhetoric to cause people to want to shoot Trump, it really feels more like people are trying to shoot a celebrity, right? John Lennon was killed by a fan, not by an enemy. So we are definitely dealing with just disturbed people who have a weird sense of what they think reality should be. And I realize this feels like very much disjointed from my original conversation, but I see so many problems with people not willing to be educated, not willing to learn anything. And not only not willing to learn something, but deciding that, oh, well, this other person agrees with me on certain things, so whatever they tell me about anything is going to be true, whether they actually know anything about it or not. They're not an expert in anything. There are a number of other people that I'm familiar with who are charlatans, they're known charlatans. They lie about their credentials, and then they proceed to tell people the same handful of arguments about why they're right and everybody else is wrong, and they make the false claim that, hey, if you can prove it, I'll shut up. And then there's mountains of evidence and across multiple disciplines to prove a thing. It's like, oh, that's all lies. That's all. You're stupid. You're stupid if you believe that. Like, you don't care. You're just disingenuous. You're not interested in learning anything or having a real discussion. You just want to push whatever gets you popular and paid. You're not interested in actually solving anything. You're trying to feed your ego. You're not trying to learn jack. Frankly, I would rather learn. I would rather understand things. If this experiment with the podcasting goes nowhere, okay, I'll probably keep doing it. I don't know. Maybe I like the sound of my own voice. Maybe I finally feel like I'm worth recording my diatribes and putting it out there for people to deal with, to do what they want with it. And not everybody's going to find it. Not everybody's going to see what I'm doing or locate me. Word of mouth maybe. Some of the people I find, like I said, and the other day, Emma Thorne, she's got Bart Ehrman on. I like Bart Ehrman. It's not the kind of guest I would expect, a 30-year-old gamer girl from the UK to be able to pull. That's, to me, it's a big deal. And more than once, right? It wasn't a one-off. She had him on 3 or 4 times, and I can't remember. She had a couple other people in a similar vein, but people for whom I had their books before I knew about them through her. So, it's interesting to see some of that alignment and to see how the possibilities of what this could become is entertaining. It's interesting. Because there are questions I'd like to ask some of these guys, but I'd hope it would be a different question. But, maybe I'm not the right guy for them. I don't know. The point is, ABC, always be curious. Always be curious, because we don't know what we don't know. We may insist that we know something. We may insist that that our way is the only way. But is there evidence? Are there experts out there who provided evidence consistently? Who provided evidence across disciplines, right? Anytime there's a one-off study that the media will purport as, hey, this thing is real. Like, A, they barely read the abstract, so they don't even know what they're talking about. And B, it was one study, peer review aside. But, peer review becomes the point. Like, all right, well, how many other people can duplicate this work? Right? There's still people out there saying that vaccines cause autism, and they've never caused autism. It's always been a lie. Andrew Wakefield lied about it. He lost his license. He's the laughingstock of that community, but he's become this hero because he's doubled down on the lie that he himself created and perpetuated. And it's not true. It's never been true. Countless other studies have taken place that invalidate his bullshit. People don't want to hear it. They want to believe that those in charge are out to get everybody. And it's a nightmare because it's easier to spread a lie than it is to spread the truth. The amount of information and knowledge you have to have in order to debunk BS claims, it is a lot. And it does require effort, but people want to feel like they know something. And that's how I grew up. I grew up in this kind of community. I grew up in this sense that we have to be right. And the only reason I am where I am now is because I have too many times where I was shown to be wrong very easily, very simply. And now there's so much more to learn and to understand. I think it's given me more insight into certain areas. But then in some cases, I still have to do the things. Like I know a handful of things that I could do to make my own circumstances, physically anyway, better. I haven't been real good about those. And it's probably helping to contribute to some of my mental issues, right? Some of the chemical balances I'm creating in myself. So, knowing and doing are two different things, but they can go hand in hand. So, stay in school, keep trying to learn, always be curious. There are experts, there are scientific, there are people that communicate the information. Like you look at Neil deGrasse Tyson, he was a physicist and now he's a science communicator, right? He's an expert in that discussion and that topic. But he should also be able to point you in directions. should be able to give you an idea of where this stuff is coming from. And I don't always agree with kind of the way that Neil presents things, but he's one of the best, right? He's kind of the second coming of Sagan in the scientific communication. That's because he did his own Cosmos series, in honor of Sagan, but just given the position that he has and his popularity. And, I think Sagan was probably the king. I haven't come across anything that makes me think anything different. Right? I've got a couple of his books. I've watched part of the original Cosmos. It's just you have to be willing to dig, or you have to accept that there are people that do this on a day-to-day basis. You have to accept that they have a clue, and you ask them questions. You don't just TikTok your way out of doing something. All right, well, I'm here, so I'm going to go, but thanks for listening.